Hello everyone. So today we will be discussing about the spinal cord anatomy, in which we will see about its external features and its internal features. In the external features, we will talk about its extent, length and shape initially. So let's see. In case of the adults, its extension is from the C1 to L1 and typically till the lower border of the L1, and in case of neonates from C1 to the upper border of the L3, and its length is about 45 centimeter in case of males and 42 centimeter in case of females. And let's talk about its shape. Its shape is cylindrical, but it has two bulges. The bulges we can that can be seen at the places like the cervical enlargement and the lumbar enlargement. This cervical enlargement is because it gives rise to the brachial plexus at this point, and this lumbar enlargement is because it will give rise to the lumbar and the sacral plexus, and this basically supplies the lower limb, and this cervical enlargement gives supply to the upper limb. And its extent is from the C3 to T2 spinal segments, and the lumbar enlargement is about L1 to S3 spinal segments. And these enlargements are basically because of the more and more deposition of white and gray matter at that point, at that places, and it leads to the enlargement here. And there is increased number of motor and sensory neurons specifically at these points. So next we will talk about, like, this is the end point of the spinal cord. Let's talk about the end point of spinal cord. We can see here this part, this conical structure part is the end point of the spinal cord, and it is known as the conus medullaris. And this pinpoint part will further lead to a fine thread like structure up to the coccyx, which is known as the phylum terminale. And this phylum terminale is basically the modification of our pia mater. Basically, we have three modifications of pia mater, and phylum terminale is one of them, which is a basic thread like structure which extends till the coccyx. And this red part here represents the pia mater, which extends up to the S2 level. We can see here, and then we have this purple one is the arachnoid and the dura mater. This arachnoid and the dura mater will join the pia mater here at the level of S2. At S2 level it will join, and between the pia mater and this arachnoid and dura mater lining, we have this area which is filled by the CSF. The cerebrospinal fluid is present here on both sides, and this area is known as the subarachnoid space. This space is basically the subarachnoid space where is the CSF present, and it is used for the lumbar puncture. Here is written lumbar puncture. And then we have these points. I said that phylum terminale is the modification of the pia mater, along with two other modifications also. We have the arachnoid and the dura mater will join this pia mater at the level of S2, and this lumbar puncture is done at the level of L3 to L4 level, and the subarachnoid space will end at the S2 level. We can see here that this subarachnoid space is till this point, and this is the level of S2. There are arachnoid and dura mater will join the pia mater at S2 level, and the subarachnoid space will also end at the S2 level. Then this phylum terminale can be divided into two parts, that is the internus phylum terminale and the externus phylum terminale, which is made up of, this internus part is made up of the pia mater only, which is only composed of the pia mater only. And this externus part, it is basically made up of and composed of the fibrous band of pia mater, arachnoid and the dura mater, all the three ones. Then we have this coda equina. Then coda equina is basically the bundle of spinal nerve roots that is present below the termination of the spinal cord, which will extend from the L2 to S5, and these lies within the lumbar cistern, and which is surrounded by the CSF and the dura mater, and its basic function is regarding the supplying the motor and the sensory innervation to our lower limb, pelvic organs, perineum, which will control the bladder, bowel, and the sexual functions. And this we have we have coda equine syndrome also, which is basically due to the compression of the coda equina nerve roots, which is basically caused by the spinal stenosis, tumors, trauma, infections, for example the abscess. And its symptoms include the bilateral sciatica, urinary retention or incontinence, the severe low back pain, lower limb weakness, and the bowel dysfunction. And it's a very complicated situation, so we need to address this as soon as possible for its diagnosis. Then we have the three modifications of the spinal pia mater. So as I told, like phylum terminale is one modification of the pia mater. We have the other two, linea splendinus and the ligamentum denticulatum. Here we can see the transverse section of the spinal cord, in which we can see this is a fissure that is known as the anterior median fissure. This whole lining is covered by our pia mater, and this anterior median fissure is also filled by the pia mater, and this area is termed as the linea splendinus. And then we can see here our spinal cord, the cylindrical structure. It is covered by the projections, like tooth like projections. Here we can see on both the sides, and that is known as the ligamentum denticulatum, which is another modification of our pia mater, and its number is 2. Like if we are asked like what is the number of ligamentum denticulatum that surrounds our spinal cord, we will answer 2. There are only 2 ligamentum denticulatum. And if we are asked about its projections, so there are 21 projections of ligamentum denticulatum. Then we have the internal feature of the spinal cord, that includes this transverse section of our spinal cord. So basically in the center we have the central canal, and this downward fissure, that is the anterior median fissure, is basically filled by the pia mater. And this is the posterior median sulcus. This is the dorsal horn, the ventral horn on the lower area, and these horns are basically present with the gray matter. And the columns or the funiculus, the column or the funiculus, we have three: lateral, dorsal, and the ventral. These are filled by the white matter. The dorsal column, lower column, lateral column, and the ventral column present in a column like structure. And the neurons or the nuclei supply will be like this. The afferent signals will or afferent signals or the sensory signals will come through the dorsal horn only and always, and the efferent or the motor supply will be done by ventral horn, through the ventral horn. So this was all about the spinal cord anatomy, discussing about its internal features and the external features. I hope you like it. Thank you.